For most of human existence, agriculture did not exist. There were no farms, no fields, no planted seeds. Humans lived entirely at the mercy of nature. Every sunrise meant uncertainty. Every sunset meant survival. They did not wake up knowing where their next meal would come from. Food was not stored. Food was hunted or gathered or lost. For hundreds of thousands of years, humans were hunter-gatherers. They moved constantly. They followed animals. They searched for edible plants. This lifestyle shaped everything about them, their bodies, their instincts, their fears. There was no safety net, no second chance. If the hunt failed, hunger followed. If hunger lasted too long, death came quietly. Children learned fear early. They learned to walk while moving camps. They learned to eat whatever nature allowed. Nature was not friendly. Nature was powerful, unpredictable, often cruel. Storms destroyed camps overnight. Droughts erased food sources. Cold seasons killed the weak. The Ice Age dominated much of this era. Massive glaciers covered the northern lands. Temperatures were brutal. Growing seasons were short. Plants could not be relied upon. They grew briefly, then vanished. Animals migrated endlessly. So humans migrated too. They became shadows on the land, never settling, never stopping. There were no villages, no permanent shelters, no ownership of land. Land was not controlled. It was endured. And yet, despite the hardship, humans adapted. They learned which plants could be eaten, which roots were poisonous, which berries brought sickness, and which brought life. They learned animal behavior, which herds were dangerous, which animals could be hunted safely, which seasons brought abundance, and which brought despair. But this knowledge did not bring comfort. It only delayed disaster. Because the world they lived in was unstable, one cold winter could erase generations. One drought could end an entire tribe. Survival required constant movement. Movement prevented growth, and growth prevented permanence. Humans were trapped in a cycle. Hunt, eat, move, repeat. There was no time to build, no time to imagine a different future. Yet, change does not arrive suddenly. It arrives quietly. It arrives when no one is looking. As the Ice Age slowly loosened its grip, the world began to change. Temperatures rose, slowly, almost imperceptibly. Rainfall increased. Rivers expanded. New plants began to grow, not just randomly, but repeatedly. Some areas became richer than others, more fertile, more alive. Humans noticed patterns. They returned to the same places, season after season, because food was more reliable there. These places were not farms. Not yet, but they were something new. For the first time, humans stayed longer. Days became weeks. Weeks became seasons. And with staying came observation. They watched plants grow. They watched seeds fall. They watched life repeat itself. No one called it agriculture. No one planned it. But the idea was forming. Slowly, silently. At this moment, humanity stood on the edge of the greatest transformation in its history without knowing it. They still hunted. They still gathered. But the seed of change was already in the ground. Change did not arrive as a decision. It arrived as an accident. Humans did not wake up one day and decide to invent agriculture. They were not planners. They were survivors. They lived close to the land now, not permanently, but longer than before. Seasonal camps became familiar. Rivers became landmarks. Valleys became remembered places. Here, something subtle began to happen. Food scraps fell to the ground. Seeds spilled from gathered plants. Grains were dropped and forgotten. No one noticed at first. Months passed. Rain fell. The ground changed. When humans returned, the land looked different. Plants grew where none had grown before. Not randomly, not scattered. They grew where humans had lived. This was not magic. It was pattern. For the first time, humans connected cause and effect. Seed, soil, growth. They had seen plants grow before. But now, they saw repetition. Observation became curiosity. Curiosity became experimentation. Not deliberate, not organized, just instinct. Someone pressed seeds into the soil. Someone cleared stones away. Someone waited. Waiting was new. Hunters were not used to waiting. They were used to chasing. But now, they stayed. Waiting meant trust. Trust in the land. Trust in time. This was dangerous. If the plants failed, there would be no food. But sometimes, the plants succeeded. And when they did, something extraordinary happened. Food appeared, without hunting, This changed human thinking forever. Food was no longer only found. It could be encouraged. The land was no longer just crossed. It could be influenced. Gradually, humans returned again and again to the same places, not because they had to, but because they chose to. Over generations, knowledge accumulated. Which seeds grew best, which soil held water, which areas failed. This knowledge was not written. It was remembered, passed through observation. Agriculture was still fragile, still risky, but it offered something humanity had never had before: predictability. Predictability meant planning. Planning meant staying. Staying changed everything. Temporary camps became semi-permanent. Shelters improved. Belongings increased. But staying created new problems. Waste accumulated. Disease spread more easily. Resources became limited. Still, the benefits outweighed the risks, because food was now closer. Storage was revolutionary. For the first time, humans ate food from the past to survive the future. This broke the ancient cycle: hunt, eat, move. Now it became plant, wait, harvest, store. Control was new and intoxicating. Humans began to shape the land intentionally. They cleared competing plants. They protected chosen crops. They changed nature's balance. Without realizing it, humans had begun domesticating plants. Not animals yet, just land. This was the true birth of agriculture. Not fields, not tools, but intention. The seed was no longer accidental. It was chosen, and once chosen, there was no turning back. Agriculture did not simply change how humans ate. It changed how humans lived. It changed how humans thought. Once people began planting regularly, movement slowed. Migration patterns collapsed. The endless wandering ended. The land became familiar. Every stone was known. Every slope was remembered. This familiarity created attachment. For the first time in history, humans felt something new: belonging. Fields demanded presence. Crops could not be abandoned. Seeds required protection, so humans stayed. Staying transformed temporary shelters into permanent homes. Animal skins were replaced with mud. Wood frames were reinforced. Fires burned in the same place every night. A village was born, not by design, by necessity. Fields required cooperation. Harvests required timing. Storage required protection. Cooperation created organization. Tasks were divided. Some planted, some harvested, some guarded stored food. For the first time, not everyone needed to hunt. Surplus food made specialization possible. Some people stopped producing food entirely. These people became craftsmen. They created better tools, better containers, better weapons. Surplus fed innovation. As villages grew, social structures formed. Not everyone was equal anymore. Those who controlled food gained influence. Leadership emerged, at first informal, then expected, then enforced. Decisions affected everyone: when to plant, when to harvest, how to distribute food. Rules followed. Traditions formed. Agriculture created routine. Routine created time. Time allowed memory. Memory allowed culture. People began marking seasons, predicting cycles, anticipating change. This was the beginning of calendars, not written, observed. With predictability came belief. Humans began attributing growth to unseen forces. Rain became sacred. Soil became symbolic. Harvest became ritual. Religion was born in the field, not in the sky, not in the stars, in the soil. As villages expanded, populations grew. Children survived more often. Food shortages decreased. More people meant more pressure. Land became valuable. Boundaries appeared. Conflict followed. Other groups wanted fertile land. Agriculture created wealth. Wealth invited violence. Defense became necessary. Walls appeared. Guards emerged. Villages became fortified. At the same time, animals were changing too. Humans noticed something else. Animals stayed near camps. Some animals were tolerated. Some were protected. Some were controlled. This was not kindness. It was opportunity. Domestication began. Animals were no longer hunted exclusively. They were managed. Animals provided meat, milk, hides. They reduced risk. Food became diversified. With plants and animals controlled, humans crossed a threshold. They no longer adapted to nature. They reshaped it. Villages expanded into towns. Trade routes formed. Surplus moved beyond the community. Trade created connection. Connection created complexity. Complexity demanded systems. Counting, measuring, recording. The seeds of writing were planted, not to tell stories, but to manage food. Agriculture did not follow civilization. Civilization followed agriculture. But something was lost. Freedom. The freedom to move. The freedom to abandon land. Fields chained humans to soil. Agriculture demanded labor. Every day, every season. There were no days off. Still, there was no return. The old nomadic life was gone. Agriculture had won. Human history had changed direction forever. Agriculture gave humans power, but power always comes with a cost. At first, that cost was invisible. Food was abundant. Villages were full. Children survived. It felt like victory. But beneath the surface, something had changed forever. Agriculture demanded constant labor. Hunting was dangerous, but it was short. Farming was safer, but it never ended. The land owned humans now. Crops could not wait. Animals could not be ignored. Seasons controlled life. There was no escape. Farmer looking across fields at dawn, tired eyes, sense of obligation rather than freedom. As villages grew, food became power. Those who controlled storage controlled survival. Inequality was born. Some ate well. Others barely survived. Agriculture created wealth, and wealth created classes. Hierarchy hardened. Leaders became rulers. Rules became laws. Obedience became expected. Crowded living conditions brought new dangers. Disease spread faster. Waste accumulated. Animals lived closer to humans. Nutrition changed. Hunter-gatherers ate diverse foods. Farmers ate mostly grain. Bodies weakened. Skeletons would later reveal the truth. Early farmers were shorter, sicker, weaker. Agriculture fed more people, but it did not make individuals healthier. Still, population exploded. More people meant more land was needed. Forests were cleared. Wetlands drained. Wild nature retreated. Humans reshaped the planet. Irreversibly. Conflict increased. Land was no longer shared. It was owned. War was no longer rare. It was organized. Agriculture made armies possible. Surplus fed soldiers. Soldiers protected land. Land produced more surplus. A cycle of power formed. Yet despite all of this, there was no return. The old nomadic life was gone. Humans could no longer simply walk away. They were tied to soil, to seasons, to systems. But from this control came everything we recognize as civilization. Cities, writing, science, empires. None of it existed before agriculture. Every kingdom, every monument, every war, all traced back to a single act. A seed placed in soil. Agriculture was not humanity's greatest invention. It was humanity's greatest gamble. And humanity never stopped playing. We traded freedom for control, risk for routine, nature for power. From that moment onward, humans were no longer just part of the natural world. They were its architects and its prisoners.